Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Eddrick Show. I am your host, Eddrick Jerome. This is the place for intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and you'll get notified when I post content each and every week. I have a distinguished guest on my show today. I want to welcome renowned graphic artist Eric Drooker. He's here to discuss his new book, Naked City, which is the third volume of his City Trilogy series. His first book, Flood, a novel in pictures, won the American Book Award. Eric is a frequent cover artist for The New Yorker, and he's known for incorporating themes of social justice and political commentary in his vivid and expressive style. Eric's art can be seen in the permanent collections of the Whitney Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, and the Brooklyn Museum. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Eddrick. Good to be here.
My pleasure. First of all, congratulations on the book. As I mentioned when we were discussing before we came on, I really enjoyed it, so I want to get into it. So tell me about Naked City, your inspiration for writing it and illustrating it, and also how it fits in your trilogy, the City Trilogy series.
Yes, well, how it fits into the trilogy, and this is the final book in this three-part trilogy. The first two were wordless. They were silent, in other words, graphic novels, sequential art, but no one had any word balloons. There were no captions. The first one was real experimental. I was trying to see how far I can go, how much of a story could I tell, how involved could the plot be if there are no words at all. They say, I remember having an English teacher in high school who said that you shouldn't use too many extra syllables, that good writing is very refined. You edit out all the extraneous words and you only use those words that are necessary. And you avoid using these 4 or 5 syllable words. You should be able to speak directly. So I took him literally and got carried away and edited down to the minimum number of syllables, which is no words at all, and discovered that if you tell a story with a series of pictures, you could go pretty far with that. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Okay. But if you have a series of pictures and a sequence, you could go pretty far that way. So the first 2 books were these purely graphic novels. No language, just purely graphic means. This new one that finally came out several years later, this one was a challenge because it was the first book that had words. It looks perfectly normal. Most comic strips or comic books or graphic novels have word balloons and captions in them, but this was a new challenge for me. Also, this one is funny. The first 2 were more serious, or almost tragic, I dare say. But of course, it's easy to tell a sad story because life itself is tragic much, if not most of the time. I found it way more challenging to be humorous, to tell a funny story. So this one, I felt like this last third and final volume in the trilogy was in a way the most difficult, and it certainly took me the longest to complete.
In the book, you raise several questions. There's companionship. I mean, there's a lot of things in your book that are worth talking about, but I want to hone in on one particular one because you take up the case of the struggling artist, the artist's ability to survive, and just how an artist can go from nothing to getting everything they want, and then there's not happiness. I mean, there's that part of your story as well. But tell me about your own take on that, and being an artist and someone in this 21st century. What's your take on artists now, and is it possible for artists to really survive and with everything that's going on and all the different ways that art can be shown? Tell me about the struggling artists now versus maybe when you came along and some of the things that you had to go through.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's an excellent question. I suppose it's an eternal question for humanity: is can the artist survive? And it's a question that it's a little hard to answer because, I mean, all of us are just around for a few decades. It's hard to know, like, has it always been this difficult for an artist to make a living? I tend to think yes, at least in Western culture, where we have the myth of the starving artist, which every art director and every boss I've ever had has just tried to confirm that. Like, well, artists are used to not getting paid much anyway. So I think there's always been that. And when we say artists, we're not just talking about the visual artists, we're also talking about writers, poets, musicians, dancers, right? The arts. It's always been difficult. It's always been challenging to try to make a living from it. In a way, it really is asking a lot for someone to actually pay us for in my case, for pictures that I would likely be doing anyway, since I love drawing and I love telling stories since I was a child. But it seems to me that I've been doing this for a long time now, and now that we're getting deeply into the 21st century here, it seems that it's getting considerably more difficult now for all kinds of reasons. And this is one of the questions that the characters in the story are asking. Is it possible for an artist to survive in the 21st century? And I think the honest answer is yes, it's possible, but it's a long shot. Not many do. I mean, I'm sure all of us have a few artist friends or writer friends, musician friends. How many of them are actually making a living and able to pay their rent and pay for groceries from their art? And I think it's a minority. I think it's of them. It's a lucky few who are able to somehow, turn it into Benjamins, as we say, in the 21st century parlance.
Exactly.
So I suppose I'm one of the lucky ones that I've been able to hustle and get by and just squeaking by, make a living from it. But it's always been rough. And it's certainly not getting any easier. Maybe we could leave it at that. Not getting any easier with things coming at us from every direction. I mean, artists are just working people in the end, pretentious working people. And things are getting more difficult for working people for all kinds of reasons. And artists, we now have the latest thing on the horizon to keep us up at night is this AI, right? Artificial intelligence. There's technology, special machines that are able to create pictures at the press of a button. In 2 seconds, it could spit out an image that's passable. It may not be that good, but good enough for an art director to sign off on, and good enough to take the job of an illustrator or an aspiring illustrator or writer. So we'll see. We'll see if artificial intelligence is the final nail in the coffin, so to speak.
You mentioned your first couple of books were in the trilogy were picture oriented, and then this one has words. But the one thing that I really liked about this book is that it's really character driven. There's some memorable characters in the story that you tell through those characters.
Thank you.
My favorite character is Mr. Nobody, the window washer. Can you talk to me about that character in particular? Was he drawn from someone you've encountered? Was this a real person? Because out of all the characters, and they're all memorable, his character just resonated with me because he kind of touches on a lot of the story in a lot of different ways.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad Mr. Nobody spoke to you. When I first started working on the story several years back, he was really the protagonist. It started with him, and the story evolved with him. But then, I don't know, I hit a point where I felt like, well, what was the problem? I think it may have been partly economic, that I decided, you know what, I'm going to have to shelve this thing for a while. And I put it in the back of a filing cabinet for several years. And when I came back and was hustling, doing other commercial jobs or painting and things like that, that paid a little bit more regularly than this very tenuous field of graphic novel. Yes, what do you do for a living? I'm a graphic novelist. Okay, good luck with that. But when I came back and picked up where I left off, I then put this character, this window washer guy. He's really just a squeegee man. So we called them in New York. Remember, you're driving your car and you stop at a busy intersection, and some dude comes up to you with a squeegee, unsolicited, and starts washing the windows of your car. The windows are already perfectly clean, thank you, but you realize, oh, it's not really about that. He's trying to make his living, and he's desperate, doesn't have anything except a squeegee in his hand. So that was always a poignant role, poignant situation. I thought I would make him a character. But when I started working on the later draft of the story, he didn't really come up. Or he didn't come up till later chapters in the story. I had these other protagonists. Mm-hmm. The main protagonist is this young woman. I guess she's about, 18, 19? Mm-hmm. I don't think she ever says, but she's a young woman who hitchhikes from Detroit or somewhere in the Midwest. She hitchhikes to the big city of New York to make a living as a singer-songwriter. She has that's her dream anyway, that she's going to be a successful singer-songwriter. And she doesn't encounter this squeegee man, Mr. Nobody, till later, much later on in the story. And we don't want to.
No spoilers.
Spoilers here, but he ends up playing a major role in the story and kind of changes the course of her life on, I guess, at least a couple of occasions. I suppose he changes the course of the painter's life. Yes. The painter is the other kind of secondary protagonist, and he's really he's the comic relief in what's otherwise a fairly serious narrative. I mean, her story, she has this humorous moments, but her story is actually quite sad. Again, without giving too much away, we gradually learn that she's hitchhikes to New York because there wasn't very much left holding her there in Detroit. She was in a pretty desperate situation, and that's what drew her to the big city. But yes, in a way, the Mr. Nobody, the man with the squeegee, ends up being the secret. He's kind of the secret hero of the story. Yes, thank you. I'm glad you caught that.
I did. One of the other things about not just Naked City and your other work is you're able to capture the sights, the sounds, the feelings, and even it feels like the smell of New York. It's such a important part of the backdrop of the story. It's actually its own character. If you think about it, the city is actually a character as well. So how did growing up in New York, obviously it has influenced you as an artist, but why is it so central to you to make sure that, New York is very front and center in what you do, and it's a repeated theme in your work?
Yes. Well, with me, it's not even really that conscious or even a question of how much should I highlight the background, the city, the buildings. It's just this given that the city is not only is the city a character in the story, but the city is paramount. The context that everything takes place in. Of course, I was born and raised here in Manhattan. And when you're young, when you're a kid, you don't really question. We take it for granted where we grew up. That's just the background noise, literally the background noise. And forgive me if you hear sirens in the distance here. I have the window open a crack. But as I got into my teenage years, and as a young adult, and as a young art hustler, I realized, hey, this is how lucky I was to grow up in a big city. especially in New York, as a creative person because it's a nonstop source of inspiration. For better or worse, it's such an intense place to grow up that you step out the front door and you're assaulted by all kinds of sights and sounds and well, the people too will literally assault you. I guess first had a knife pulled on me. It was Halloween, which is coming up soon. But when I was 12 years old, was the first time I got mugged. Was on Halloween. Me and some of my friends who had shopping bags full of candy. We'd shaken down a whole building full of, and not just candy, but remember UNICEF? Did they have that when you were growing up? The teachers would give you little orange cardboard boxes that you folded out. And he went door to door, not only saying trick or treat, but he said, trick or treat for UNICEF. What was it an acronym for? It was UN. It was for the United Nations. We were raising money and people would put little pennies into the carton. How could they resist? These are little 8, 9-year-old children saying trick or treat for UNICEF. So when you came in to school the next day, you would hand in these boxes of pennies. There'd be a few nickels, an occasional dime and quarter in there, but the kids in the class and the whole school were raising money for the United Nations. Maybe it was just a New York thing. The UN is located. It's about a 15-minute walk from where I'm sitting here. It's right up here on First Avenue. Also, the neighborhood that I grew up in was a real crossroads. I grew up on East 14th Street, which is kind of the dividing line between uptown and down. Everything below 14th Street is downtown and kind of dangerous, the wrong side of the tracks. And everything on the north side of 14th Street is Midtown, Manhattan, kind of the more middle class, the business district. Every city, I guess, has that. Market Street in San Francisco sort of plays that role. But I feel like just the city itself there were so many vivid details, especially to a young person. And there's so many different kinds of people, and they all, so many languages are spoken. Not only Black and white and Latino and Asian, but everything, Muslim, Arab people from Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Northern Europe, Africa, South Africa, Chinatown, and then there Korean spoken, Japanese, Yiddish, Hebrew. There were, I guess it's dozens of languages are swirling around you. Most cities, even a big city like, like you, where you grew up in the East Bay, if you're in Oakland or Richmond, yes, there are several languages going on, and it could be confusing for a little child, but it's kind of exciting too because hey, there's all kinds of people, all kinds of stuff going on. This is where wonders never cease. But in New York, on the Lower East Side, where I grew up, I think it was dozens of languages spoken, maybe hundreds of languages are being spoken in New York. If you go out to the outer boroughs, if you go out to Brooklyn or Queens or visit the Bronx, where my mother was born and raised, I'd go up to visit grandma and grandpa, and that was a whole other planet, the Bronx. And hey, it's just a 15-minute subway ride, and you get out, and it's a whole other landscape. So the city is the thing that haunts me more than anything else, and I guess is the main subject matter of the artwork. If you just strip out all of the characters, all the protagonists, what remains is really the city itself is the recurring theme, and it's always the big city. It's never a small town. It's always big, tall buildings. It's the metropolis. It's Gotham. If you read Batman, it's Gotham City. Is just an exciting, stimulating place for a creative person.
Shout out
There's
to Batman.
never any shortage of ideas in the big city. If you ever drawing a blank, just look out the window and you'll have a few dozen ideas waiting for you.
The irony is that based on everything you just said and how New York is such a central theme in your work, you have been multiple edition cover artist for the New Yorker. So it just kind of all fits. Tell me about how that came about. How did you get your first cover on the New Yorker? And what's that experience been like for you? Because, as I would think as an artist, that's probably one of the most coveted covers, right? I mean, that's people
Yes,
strive to have a cover on the New Yorker. So
it's
tell me about that
true.
experience.
Well, I mean, the New Yorker, it happened so gradually that most of us, most people, even now, don't realize the fact that the New Yorker has now wound up being virtually the only magazine that has art on its covers. I mean, first of all, there used to be dozens and dozens, hundreds more magazines than there are now, because print media is obviously on the way out with the rise of internet
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot, and podcasts and things like that. But if you look around on a newsstand, if you could even find a newsstand in the 21st century, what magazines remain all have photography, just pictures
Mm-hmm.
on the cover. This is what we're accustomed to now. It seems perfectly normal, but this wasn't the case when we were children. It certainly wasn't the case in the late 20th century. So the New Yorker has every week, it's a weekly magazine, and it always allows the artist full reign on the cover. In fact, it leaves it really open. It doesn't have any words superimposed on top of your artwork, except for the masthead, the logo. The New Yorker is on top. But then they allow a different artist each cover to do pretty much whatever they want. Sometimes it's thematic. Like now, there have been a couple of covers about the election
Mm-hmm.
coming up, but of course, we don't want to dwell on that right now if we don't have to. But I'm trying to answer your question, Eddrick. I think the first cover I did for them seemed like such a long shot because I never really looked at the New Yorker much, and it's such an uptown publication here in New York. But the fact that I'm a native New Yorker gave me a certain feeling of privilege. Hey, I'm a New Yorker myself. That I should be able to somehow infiltrate their magazine. How many of them are from is the art director or the editor in chief? They're probably from the Midwest or Europe or something. I'm from here, so I have a unique perspective on New York. At least this is what I was telling myself. And well, I mean, let's just leave it this way. The ratio is most of the covers and ideas that I send them get rejected immediately. Sometimes they don't even respond. It just falls upon deaf ears. But what's encouraged me over the years is that some percentage, I don't know, is it 20%, something like that, 1 out of 5, that would be, make it. They like it. They suddenly reply and say, "Hey, yes, we like that. Is this the finished version? We'd like to run this on the cover of the upcoming issue." Right. So that's always music to one's ears. And given enough time, the musician Mose Allison once said, "If you live, your time will come." Over the years, I've landed a few covers and they accumulate. Only once or twice a year do I manage to land a cover on the New Yorker magazine, but over a decade or two, hey, that's several dozen covers. That looks good when you look at them all at once like that, and it's on a range of themes. Although it's true, the overwhelming majority of them are the city
Yeah, absolutely.
itself. The
Absolutely.
city is my muse. I guess that's the word. The city is my muse. It's not so much the human body or the human condition or this or that or color or pattern or texture. It's really the city, the buildings, the verticality, the shape of that magazine is vertical. So I've often utilized that, the fact that the city and New York is unusual compared to Los Angeles, which is very horizontal and spread out, the urban sprawl, even of the Bay Area. But in New York, it's all very concentrated into Manhattan Island, which just goes straight up, vertical, in a vertical orientation. And it's only going higher. I mean, there's a perpetual building boom underway where they just keep building higher and higher and more skyscrapers, and the sky's the limit seems to be the motto around here. And it even has a bit, it's a bit insane. There's that, like, this is, fellas, don't you think this is a bit extreme? I mean, you already built several skyscrapers right over there and over there, but they just keep going. They keep going with it. Oh, and it's all about Benjamins. It's all about the big money on big real estate. And there's Trump Tower, and Donald Trump has several buildings, and all of the billionaire builders are trying to outdo each other. So it's also very much about that, the male ego. My building is taller than your building. And
Exactly.
so I guess ultimately it is the human condition, even if there aren't any human bodies or faces. The buildings themselves, right, are just reflections of us, of the human ego, or a part of the human psyche is expressed in just these bizarre structures that we build over the years, these towers, these towers of Babel, you might say.
Quick aside, I had the chance to visit New York a couple of years ago. And, growing up here in the Bay Area, obviously San Francisco is the big city, right? And I was
Oh,
struck
yeah.
by the scale and the magnitude of what you're talking about the high-rise buildings. It was enormous. And so when I flew back into San Francisco, it looked small. It looked
Yes.
tiny. And it's just that perspective
Mm.
of being
Mm.
in New York City, being in Manhattan. We were walking around Manhattan. It's enormous. And so I can imagine that's a fertile ground for an artist to use, because there's so much ways that you can incorporate the views, the perspectives, the things like that you were just talking about.
Yes. And as you're saying, the scale, the mere scale of a city like New York is so extreme, so off the hook that and this, I guess this was one of the downsides of being born and raised in New York City, is everything makes you feel so small.
Mhm.
Where all of humanity is dwarfed by the size of the structures around them. I mean, you go anywhere else, and yeah, a house is bigger than the people who live in the house, but not that much. It's just a big box to fit your family in. It's got to be a little bigger than that so you could fit all your furniture and books and things like that, a refrigerator and things like that. But it's so preposterous in a city like this, where it's 10 stories, a 20-story building, 50-story buildings. And it's true, when you then get accustomed to it, if you do ever get accustomed to a city like New York, you visit another city like San Francisco, and it looks like, are you kidding me? This is a metropolis? This seems like a small town after New York. No, we have a downtown business district. We have skyscrapers too. And what? This is like a handful of skyscrapers, elevator buildings. Yeah, but you're kidding me here. This is it. This is your city. So it's all relative, just like Berkeley or Oakland, they feel like suburbs of San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
But San Francisco feels like you're in the suburbs compared to New York or a big city like Chicago. You then visit San Francisco and you feel like you're in like the Amazon rainforest or something. You people, you don't know how good you have. You got all kinds of trees here, palm trees all amidst the buildings. Manhattan, you could walk and walk for a couple of miles without seeing a single tree. It's everything. The whole landscape is man-made. It's all concrete. And and no, I'm not being sexist here, but no, it's not human-made. It's man-made.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the other problematic things about Manhattan is All the architects, all the builders are men. I don't know. Maybe are there any women any of the builders women? I don't know if there's even one. So your whole environment, it's a man. Literally, it's a man-made environment where you could look up, down, sideways, and you're not seeing any nature, any organic shapes. There are not too many curves. It's all right angles and cubes and boxes, and everything is artificial. So that gets to be a bit much after a while. You want to at least be able to escape occasionally. And thank goodness that we have a few parks here, not many, not compare other cities. I was just visiting a friend of mine, childhood friend in Portland. Portland, I think, is built into the city charter that every number of blocks there has to be a public park, just to keep everyone sane. Every 5 blocks or something, you're walking in any direction, and there'll be a small park where you could sit down on a bench and catch your breath. But no, we have no such rule or regulation here in Manhattan. No. It seems like it's built for robots. In the future, if the right things are going in the future, the city will just be robots, and will be fully retrofitted for mechanical beings, because there's not too many benches where you could sit down and catch your breath. No.
Well, I have just a couple of questions left, and one of them is related to art and politics, and because in many of your work and some of your covers, you're able to balance just not the artistic side and the artistic expression, but you're also able to show a particular political point of view. One cover that struck me was your homage to Colin Kaepernick, where you had the NFL player who was kneeling, and I think you had an everyman football player kneeling. Talk to me about art and politics as we were talking about the 21st century today. In this, what I think we're entering into an era of almost hyper censorship where everything is so politicized. Are you feeling that as an artist? Are you feeling like you're still able to express everything you want to say, or are you even now pausing to go, maybe I shouldn't go there? Or what's your take on
Yes, I think I am. I think it's affecting all of us. I think it's affecting our consciousness, and it's not all negative. It's not all just about censorship. It's that we're in a moment now. Who knows how it will longer it will last, or maybe it's just getting started. But many people are hyper sensitive about how they're portrayed, or how we refer to them, or if they're included in the narrative or not. And that's a really mixed bag, isn't it, Eddrick? I mean, some of it is simply, in recent decades, women are crying out, "Hey, what's up with that? You just admitted that every single building in New York City is built by a male architect, and why should we tolerate this for a minute longer?" And you're goddamn right. I'm bitter about it. A lot of people are angry. Every different ethnic group seems to be sincerely feeling like they're the victim of history, right? Jews feel like they're the victim of history, but then there's other group feels like, no, you're the oppressors right now. And just between genders, men are feeling often like they're the victims, and women are jumping down their throat, or black people are jumping down white people's throat. Everyone seems to be perceiving these just through their own experience, and there seems to be a lack of empathy or ability to see things through the eyes of another, or to put ourselves in the shoes of another. And of course, if there is a way out, if there is a key, I think that's it, is empathy, so that we could understand that we all have infinitely more things in common than the things pulling us apart. But it's easy to miss that these days, and it's affecting all of us. Maybe especially creative people or storytellers, or especially people who are trying to tell humorous stories. you know, hearing stand-up comedians now seem to be complaining about it most loudly. You can't say anything anymore. You can't tell a joke about this, a joke about that. People are it's gonna hurt their feelings, and you're gonna get in trouble, and you're gonna get canceled. Well, yes and no. I mean, again, I feel like of two minds about that. I feel like, we should be more, everyone should be more sensitive than we're being. You can't, I don't know that we could be too sensitive. And yet we shouldn't be frightened. We shouldn't be running scared to say how we, feel, as long as we're expressing it in a polite way. Or maybe that's the, maybe that's really the key, or maybe that's really what we're missing, is not that everything has to be politically correct. Everything has to be, what are they calling it now? Everything has to be PC was the term we used until recently. But maybe there's just a better realistic way of looking at that, is that PC just means being sensitive. We need to be more sensitive. Just need to be more sensitive to people's feelings, especially people who were invisible to us, people who we didn't really perceive, people who were maybe outside of the dominant group or the mainstream. We do need to be more sensitive. So in that respect, I'm in favor of us all taking a pause and being more mindful and more sensitive and all that. But it also cuts the other way, where it could have a chilling effect, especially if it's coming from the right wing, which seems to have a knee-jerk propensity to censor and to want to ban books and all of that. I mean, I see that's kind of clearly having a negative and chilling effect on our culture. But I suppose that's always been the case. I feel like the right wing, or people who are extremely conservative, always have that impulse to try to clamp down on what people are saying or the language that we're using, and to try to censor or to deny the reality of it all. So in a way, we're accustomed to that reality. I think what's troubling now, in just the recent years, it's a lot of that impulse to silence speech or to clamp down seems to be coming from the other direction as well. It's not like liberals or the left wing is now playing the role of the censor, but it seems like they're getting into the act also, where they're the right wing. It's to be expected. They love banning books. They love burning books. We got photographs and black and white newsreel footage of them throwing books into a bonfire and burning them on many, many occasions. That's nothing new. But it seems that liberals now, I don't know if it's the left, but liberals seem to be getting in on the action, where they're very quick to clamp down and say, nope, you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that. Well, here's an example, a concrete example, even from my own, from the book we're talking about, Naked City, right? I was able to get it published. I found a publisher, but there were a couple of publishers that passed on it, and their reason that they gave, anyway, you never really know the actual reason, but the reason that they gave, that they told my agent, was that, well, this is the protagonist is a young woman, and she's a young woman of color. We realize that she's what is it? Her father's Italian,
and
her mother is Mexican.
From Mexico.
Right, which to me is just all in a day's work. Growing up in New York City, all of my friends are a blend of the half Jewish, half Black, half Puerto Rican, half Chinese. That's kind of what being a New Yorker is now. But I was realizing that yes, but most editors grew up in the suburbs. Most editors are white people. Most white people grew up in the suburbs. It's all theoretical. It's all academic to them much of the time. And even when they're well-meaning, they seem to be they were concerned about the fact that this story has the protagonist is a young woman whose mother is Mexican. And I'm like, yes, well, okay, but you're not a young woman, Mexican woman of color, and you're the writer. I go, yes. Well, it's called imagination, or it's called empathy, isn't it? That's the whole gig for an artist, as far as I'm concerned. But many editors, at least in this moment we're in, are saying, no, no, we feel that people should be telling their own stories right now. And I could see their point. Certainly more women should be published, and women of color should be getting published right now. And that's the job of the editors and the publishers. So I agree with that. But it shouldn't be a zero-sum game, right? If someone else should also, if they're doing a good job as an artist and telling the story well, they should also be able to tell the story of whoever it is. Did Shakespeare need to be Jewish in order to write The Merchant of Venice? Not to compare myself with Willie the Shake, but I mean, that's a famous example. And I think now, in fact, that would be a ready-made New Yorker cartoon. William Shakespeare standing there at the editor's desk, and they're rejecting his latest play, Merchant of Venice, because he's just some white European guy. He doesn't know what it's like to be a Jewish person who's oppressed, whose people have been oppressed through the centuries. We're sorry. We like your book. It has we like the language. You're able to turn a phrase, some excellent dialogue, but we're going to pass on your latest play because we think that people should be telling their own stories right now. In fact, everyone needs to stay in their own lane, seems to be the theme going on right now among liberal editors. There's a feeling, I think they're oversimplifying what is maybe a sincere, well-meaning intention. I think it's missing the ball a lot of the time. That everyone needs to stay in their lane. What? Only a woman is able to write a story where the protagonist is female. Only a Jew is able to write about Jewish history, and on and on and on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's an open question. I could easily argue it the other way. Well, yes. We have so many examples in Hollywood of telling story, with Indians in it, and it's but they're getting it all wrong. They're gonna do a really poor job of it. We should have those people telling their own stories. Exactly. That's exactly right. So it's the truth, as usual, lies somewhere in the middle. But hey, we're just human, and we're easily confused. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise going on, and it's easy to get confused. And as a creative person, I guess the challenge is always to try to stay focused and try to follow through. When you start a story, you start a book, sometimes it takes years to complete it. Are you going to be able to sustain not just the momentum, but the original intention, and stay true to the protagonists? And sometimes the protagonist might not be someone of your ethnicity. Mm-hmm. And is that okay? Mm-hmm. You're still going to try your best. If you're sincere about it, and you grew up surrounded by people like this, and you've loved people like this, you should be. I think that's the challenge. That's the gig of a creative person. That you should be able to pull it off and speak through the voice and through the eyes of another, if you have the proper empathy, and if you were paying attention over the years to your surroundings, and you didn't have that tunnel vision or ethnocentricity. Mm-hmm. That we're all raised, I guess we're all raised to have in this culture. So I'll trail off there. What do you think about this?
It is
it's
an
a
open
poignant
question.
question.
One thing I wanted to point out, because we have about a minute or two left, but I'm going to recommend a book to you and my listeners, because you mentioned Shakespeare, and the book is titled Shakespeare's Dark Lady, and it's written by John Hudson. There's brand new scholarship now that perhaps most of the work by William Shakespeare was written by a dark-skinned Jewish woman named Amelia Bassano. So
Oh, snap!
so
I
I'm going to recommend that book to
I
you.
haven't heard this rumor yet.
It's called Shakespeare's Dark Lady. I'm about halfway through it, and it's very eye-opening as it relates to Shakespeare and the economic engine of Shakespeare and why this book is so threatening. But I'll leave it there. Um, my last question for you is that if people want more information about you, or they want more information about the book Naked City, or information about you in general, where can they go?
I guess the quickest one stop shop answer for that is my website, Drooker.com. Pretty simple. Drooker, Drooker, right? D as in David, Rooker, Drooker.com. And there's thousands of images to look at there, all the New Yorker covers, all of the graphic novels, all of my street posters too. Some of the images would probably be familiar to people just from seeing them on the street over the years. But also beyond that, yeah, you could just do a Google search on me, or look at done a lot of album covers, bands like Rage Against the Machine and things like that. But pretty ubiquitous in the culture over the years. So a lot of the images will probably be familiar to people. But if you want just a quick taste, yeah, just look at the website, Drooker.com.
Excellent. Excellent. I'll have the crawl down there and people can see it. Well, Eric, again, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much
Likewise.
for coming on. I appreciate your time. The book is titled Naked City, the third volume of his City Trilogy series. I encourage you to pick it up. It is a great read, both visually, and the characters will stay with you. So, Eric Drooker, renowned graphic artist, thank you so much for appearing on the Eddrick
Thank you,
Show.
Eddrick. Thanks so much for having me today.
You're very welcome. This has been another edition of the Eddrick Show. I am your host, Eddrick Jerome. As promised, intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. You'll get notified when I post content each and every week. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next episode.